In this module, we will commence with AD-AS interactions and simultaneous equilibrium in goods market, capital market and labor market. The basic feature of classical model is that it is called as a full employment model. This means that under classical approach, economy is always at full employment level of output or at the potential level of output. This was then followed by Say's law, which underpinned that supply creates its own demand. For the classical, whatever is produced in the economy will be consumed. They promoted the idea of laissez-faire, which meant let there be no interference by the government if the economy wants to achieve efficient allocation of resources. Thus, they came down to the explanation of classical dichotomy, which exclusively differentiates between the real variable and the nominal variable. As according to them, output is always at the full employment, the change in money supply cannot alter the real variables such as real output. It can only affect the nominal variables, which according to the quantity theory of money explains how increase in money supply will lead to one-on-one increase in the price level in the economy and will have no effect on the real variables. Along with this, they also explain the value of output and distribution of value in their theory. According to the classist, the value added to the output by each factor of production, namely land, labor, capital and entrepreneur, is distributed amongst them as their earnings. This means out of the total value of the output, the contribution made to the output by the labor is taken by them in the form of wages, rent to the landlords, profit to the entrepreneurs and interest to the capital. So, according to classical, when there is equilibrium in the goods market, there is simultaneous equilibrium in the labor as well as the asset market. This is governed by the determination of real output through AD-AS interactions and then equilibrium in the labor market, thus determining the real number of labor used for the production and hence the real money supply determining the equilibrium in the asset market. Thus, classical model is also called as the full employment model because they believed that free market forces of demand and supply lead to full employment of resources through the automatic adjustment in overall price level, wage rate and interest rate. The AD and AD model is a macroeconomic model that explains the price level and output through the relationships of aggregate demand and supply. It is one of the primary simplified representations in the modern field of macroeconomics. The conventional supply and demand model is actually a Keynesian visualization that has come to be widely accepted image of the theory. The classical supply and demand model, which is largely based on the Say's law that supply creates its own demand, depicts the aggregate supply as being vertical at all times. The AD curve is defined by the ISLM equilibrium income at different potential price levels. The downward sloping AD curve is derived from the ISLM model. It shows the combinations of the price level and the level of output at which the goods and assets market are simultaneously in equilibrium. Thus, AD is a function of real money supply, government expenditure, taxes and autonomous consumption. The real money supply has a positive effect on the AD as does the real government spending. The exogenous component of taxes has negative effect unit. The aggregate supply curve may reflect either labor market disequilibrium or labor market equilibrium. In either case, it shows how much output is supplied by the firms at various potential price levels. The aggregate supply curve describes for each price level the quantity of output the firms plan to supply. After studying this module, you shall be able to know the concept of simultaneous interaction, understand equilibrium in labor market, understand equilibrium in product market, understand equilibrium in capital market. Next, we will understand the labor market. Labor market determines the number of labor used in the production process and the corresponding equilibrium wage rate. So, to study the labor market, we will plot number of labor against the wage rate. We will use the tools of demand and supply of labor to reach the equilibrium in the two opposing forces. Demand for labor is essentially downward sloping to the changes in the wage rate, thus showing an inverse relation. This simply means that firms will hire more labor when it becomes cheaper. For the labor, it will supply higher labor for a higher wage rate, hence labor supply and wage rate have a positive relation. Adjustment in the real wages ensures full employment. The equilibrium is when demand for labor equals supply of labor. Next, we will discuss the demand for labor, which is represented as DL. The aggregate demand for labor, that is DL, depends on the real wages in the market denoted by W. This in turn has an inverse relation with the wage rate. This is so because demand for labor adds to the cost of production. The producer, being a profit maximizer, wants to choose that level of input that minimizes his cost. So, when the wage rate falls, the labor becomes cheaper. Hence, the demand for labor input rises. If we take demand for labor to a function of the real wage rate, then we have DL is equals to F bracket real W bracket close, which is equals to F bracket W by P bracket close. There is an inverse relation between W and DL. The two important reasons for this is A. As wages fall relative to the cost of machines, that is the other inputs, then it pays the firm to substitute workers for machines. B. As wages fall, value of marginal product of labor becomes greater than W, where VMPL is equals to MPL into P. A firm employs labor up to the point where value of marginal product of labor is equal to the real wage. This is so because if the value of marginal product of labor is more than the real wage, this means that labor is more productive than what it is paid. Hence, the number of laborers can increase. When number of laborers are increased, then the marginal product of labor falls. Marginal product of labor is defined as the increment in the total value of the product caused by employing an additional unit of labor unit, keeping expenditure on the other factors unchanged. The value of marginal product of labor is simply the marginal product of labor multiplied by the price of the good. Since we assume perfectly competitive output market, we take the prices to be given. Hence, VMP tells us how much addition to the value of the output has labor contributed. As more labor is employed, marginal product of labor falls, and so does the value of marginal product of labor. A firm in optimum will not want to pay the labor more than what they are contributing. Hence, the equilibrium number of demand for labor, is where the VMP is equal to the nominal wages or where the marginal product of labor is equal to the real wages. That is, VMPL is equals to W or MPL into P is equals to W or MPL is equals to W by P, which is again equals to real wages. Moving on to the supply of labor, which is represented by SL. When W changes, it produces two effects in terms of supply of labor, that is income effect and substitution effect. Supply of labor is the decision of the labor on how much of his or her labor they want to supply. In the supply of labor theory, there is the choice between leisure and work out of the total work hours. For a labor, choice is either to work more and get more wages and hence consume more, or work less and enjoy more leisure instead of work. So, when wage rate rises, two forces decide to whether the labor will increase his labor supply or not. When wage rate rise, according to the substitution effect, work has become cheaper than leisure, or leisure has become more expensive compared to work. So, he will substitute work for leisure. But according to income effect, as income has increased and both leisure and work are normal goods, demand for both should rise, or he should increase both work and leisure as according to the income effect. Let just assume here that both the effects offset each other and hence the labor supply remains unchanged. At lower levels of income, substitution effect dominate the income effect, and hence when wage rate rises, labor increases work and hence supply of labor will rise. We take there is positive relation between the supply of labor and real wages. Equilibrium occurs where demand for labor is equal to the supply of labor. In the given diagram, the demand for labor is downward sloping with respect to real wages DL and supply of labor is taken to straight line SL. Both the curves intersect at labor quantity equal to L star and real wage rate equals to W star. At this real wage rate and labor quantity, the labor market clears. That is, there is neither any excess supply of labor nor any excess demand for labor at that wage rate. If wage rate is above that rate, then we can see there is excess supply of labor in the market, leading to unemployed labor, and at real wage below that rate, there is excess demand in the market of the labor. The equilibrium in the labor market can change if either demand for labor shifts or supply of labor shifts. In diagram, we can see a case of shift in supply of labor where we have shown an increase in the supply of labor at each given real wage rate. When supply of labor rises from SL1 to SL2, it intersects the demand curve DL at lower wage rates. The equilibrium wage rate in the labor market has reduced from W1 star to W2 star, and quantity of labor supplied in the market also increased from L1 star to L2 star. In diagram, we see the case where demand for the labor units rises at each real wage rate. The demand for labor has increased from DL1 to DL2. Given the supply at SL, the equilibrium wage rises from W1 star to W2 star. Moving on to the product market. The product market is the market for goods where the equilibrium between the aggregate demand and supply leads to the equilibrium quantity of goods and prices in the economy. It helps to attain the overall price level in the economy. It is important here to study the relationship between the prices and AD and the prices and aggregate supply, that is AS. Now we will understand relation between price and AS. In the classical scheme of things, AS is nothing to do with the prices. This is so because classical economics take aggregate supply to be at full employment level. According to the definition of full employment level, it means that level of output which is attained given the resources. So, how is AS determined? Labor market equilibrium brings about equilibrium in the goods market. The labor market equilibrium determines the equilibrium level of labor in the economy and the equilibrium level of real wages. Given the labor resources in the economy, the production function determines full employment level of output. Refer to the diagram. The total product or TP curve is plotted with increasing labor inputs. It is plotted for variable input. It drawn as concave shape because of the assumption of diminishing returns to one variable input. When more and more of labor inputs is put to the fixed factor, the output increases at diminishing rate. There is no case for increasing returns that is considered here. It means that TP curve increases at diminishing rate until maximum is reached. So, given L star equilibrium, number of labor force in the market as derived from the labor market equilibrium, the maximum output derived from labor input is Y star. This level of output determined after the equilibrium in the labor market is achieved gives the full employment level of output that the given economy can achieve. This level of full employment level of output is thus called as the aggregate supply in the economy, which is fixed the full employment level of output. Hence, AS is irrespective of any price level. Slide 20. Now, we will discuss AD and price level. AD is the aggregate demand in the economy. It is taken to be negatively related to the price level. This is so because of interaction in the ISLM curve which make AD respond inversely to the price change. The slope of AD curve reflects the extent to which the real balances change the equilibrium level of spending, taking both assets and goods market into consideration. An increase in real balances will lead to a larger increase in equilibrium income and spending, the smaller the interest responsiveness of money demand and the higher the interest responsiveness of investment demand. An increase in real balances leads to a larger level of income and spending, the larger the value of multiplier and the smaller the income response of money demand. This implies that the AD curve will be flatter the smaller is the interest responsiveness of the demand for money and larger is the interest responsiveness of investment demand. Also, the AD curve is flatter, the larger is the multiplier and the smaller is the income responsiveness of the demand for money. The equilibrium in the product market can be seen in the diagram. The AD and the AS interact in the product market to give the equilibrium in the product market. The point where potential output intersects the AD curve, we have the equilibrium price level in the market. Hence, labor market equilibrium and product market equilibrium occurred simultaneously. Moving on to the capital market. Capital market equilibrium is attained at that real rate of interest, that is ROI, at which savings equals investment. Graphically, it is attained where the savings and investment curves intersect. Capital market equilibrium is the equilibrium in the saving and investment. the total real income is divided into savings and consumption, and total spending is divided into consumption and investment. That is, Y star is equals to C plus S and AE is equals to C plus I. In the product market equilibrium, as studies above, real income is equals to savings, hence Y star is equals to AE. Thus, this gives equilibrium in the capital market as well. In the capital market, in the classical setup, savings is equals to investment.
In capital market, the savings is defined to positively related with the real interest rate. That is, as interest rate rises, saving tends to rise. This is so because in savings market, the trade-off is between consuming today and consuming tomorrow. The opportunity cost of consuming today, the rate of interest that the savers can get in future. So, if rate of interest rises, the opportunity cost of consuming rises, hence making saving more attractive as interest rate rises. Hence, the real interest rate and savings have positive relation as shown in diagram. Now, in the investment market, for investment, it is negatively related with the real interest rate. This is so because interest is payment made on the investment, as investments are borrowed and interest is the payment made in it. If interest rate rises, the investor will have to pay more for the amount taken in for the investment, and hence investment and real rate of interest are negatively related as shown in diagram. Equilibrium in the capital market is given by the interactions of the savings and investment curves as shown in diagram. In the capital market, when savings equal investment, then R star is the equilibrium real interest rate. When equilibrium is attained in the product market, which is henceforth obtained when one's labor market is in equilibrium real income is obtained. This leaves a level of saving and level of consumption. Aggregate spending is divided into consumption and investment, and hence once product market is in equilibrium, capital market is also in equilibrium, where the interest rate at which savings is equal to investment is obtained.
Let us now summarize what we have learnt in this module. The basic feature of classical model of full employment are that A. All the markets are interlinked and change in one market brings changes in the other markets. B. All the markets are simultaneously in equilibrium. This makes the classical model in general equilibrium model. The three markets are simultaneously in equilibrium in the following manner. Labor market. The equality of demand for labor and supply of labor determines the real wage rate and the level of full employment. The level of full employment is determined and so is the equilibrium wage rate. Product market. The production function and full employment level of labor together determine the full employment level of output. The full employment output is same as aggregate supply. Since aggregate supply is already determined, the aggregate demand determines the price level at which aggregate demand equals supply. The price level at which the product market is in equilibrium is attained. Capital market. The capital market brings equality between savings and investment through the adjustment in the real rate of interest. The capital market ensures that the product market is in the full employment equilibrium. Khatam?